The dust swirled around Tabitha Turner's boots as she drove the shovel into the unyielding Arizona soil, her shoulders aching from 3 straight hours of digging irrigation trenches. Her husband James had always handled this task, but James was 6 feet under now, leaving her alone on their struggling homestead outside Snowflake, Arizona in the unforgiving summer of 1886. "Damn this ground," she muttered, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, and Tabitha knew she should retreat to the shade, but the crops wouldn't water themselves. 2 months a widow, and the land was already trying to reclaim what the Turners had spent 5 years building. In the distance, the silhouette of a rider appeared on the horizon, shimmering in the heat. Tabitha straightened, reaching for the rifle she kept nearby. Visitors were rare this far out and rarely brought good news. As the rider drew closer, she could make out a lean man on a dappled gray horse, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "Madam," he called when still 20 yards away, raising his hand in greeting. "Don't mean to startle you." Tabitha kept her hand on the rifle. "State your business." The stranger reined his horse to a stop and dismounted with fluid grace. Up close, she could see he was tall with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His clothes were trail-worn but not ragged, and he carried himself with the confident ease of a man accustomed to hard work. "Name's Samuel Nash," he said, removing his hat in respect. "I've been riding from Texas looking for work. Saw you working these fields alone." His eyes, keen and direct, swept over the half-dug trenches, the withering corn stalks, the broken fence posts waiting to be mended. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not just a woman but the exhaustion etched in the lines around her eyes. "Let me stay," he said simply. "I can help." "I can't pay you," Tabitha replied, the words tasting bitter. James had left her with more debts than dollars. Samuel Nash shrugged. "Room and board is all I ask. I'm handy with tools, no farming and ranching both. Been on my own since I was 16. And why would a man with your skills work for nothing but meals and a roof? Everyone needs somewhere to be, madam, even if just for a while." There was something in his voice, a quiet resignation that spoke of a past he was running from or running toward something he couldn't name. Tabitha hesitated. Taking in a stranger was risky, but facing another day of impossible labor alone seemed riskier still. The bank would take her land if she couldn't make the harvest. 1 week, she said finally. "We'll see after that." Samuel nodded as if that was all he'd expected. "Fair enough. Where would you like me to start? Finish these irrigation trenches. I need to tend to the chickens." As she walked away, Tabitha felt his eyes on her back. She told herself the flutter in her stomach was just hunger, or perhaps the relief of having help. After all, what did it matter that Samuel Nash had the kindest eyes she'd seen since James died? He was just passing through, like the summer storms that brought rain but never stayed, or so she thought. Samuel worked until dusk, digging trenches with methodical precision. When Tabitha called him in for supper, she was surprised to find the entire field sectioned with newly dug channels, ready for the precious water they would direct from the creek. "You've done this before," she observed as he washed up at the pump outside the kitchen. "My pa had a farm in East Texas, cotton mainly, but some vegetables." Samuel dried his hands on the towel she offered. He believed in working from sunrise to sunset. The kitchen was small but neat, with a cast iron stove and a sturdy oak table James had made during their first winter. Tabitha served a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and the last of the preserved venison from last fall's hunt. "It's not much," she apologized. "It's home-cooked and offered kindly. That makes it plenty." Samuel waited for her to sit before taking his own seat. As they ate, Tabitha studied her unexpected guest. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 32 or 27. His hands were calloused but clean, and though he ate with the hunger of a man who'd been working hard, his manners were impeccable. "How long have you been widowed?" he asked after complimenting the cornbread. Tabitha stiffened. "How did you know?" "The men's boots by the door, too worn to belong to someone who's just away, and there's the ring you wear." He nodded toward her left hand. "I meant no offense. 2 months. She pushed a bean around her plate. "Fever took him. It came on sudden, and 3 days later he was gone." "I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you." The words were automatic now, said to neighbors and townspeople who offered condolences but no actual help. The land was everything to James. He came out here from Pennsylvania with nothing but dreams and determination. And you, was it your dream too? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that before. I came because I loved him, she said honestly. The dream was his, but I grew to love it too. Now it's mine to save or lose. After supper, Samuel insisted on washing the dishes while Tabitha made up a pallet for him in the barn. When she returned, he was sitting on the porch steps, whittling a piece of wood with a pocket knife. Mind if I smoke? He asked, pulling tobacco and papers from his vest pocket. Go ahead. She sat down on the opposite side of the steps, maintaining a proper distance. You never said where you were headed. Samuel's hands moved deftly as he rolled his cigarette. Don't rightly know, west, I suppose. There's talk of work in California. Long way to go. No hurry. He struck a match against the step, the brief flare illuminating the angles of his face. Sometimes the journey matters more than the destination. They sat in companionable silence as darkness settled over the land. Coyotes yipped in the distance, and the first stars appeared in the vast Arizona sky. Thank you for the work today, Tabitha said finally. Those trenches would have taken me a week. Happy to help. Samuel flicked the remains of his cigarette into the dirt. I'll mend that fence tomorrow if that suits you. Tabitha nodded, suddenly aware of how long it had been since she'd sat with anyone in the evening quiet. That would be fine. That night, she lay awake longer than usual, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another human presence on her property. It should have been unsettling, but instead, it felt like the homestead had breathed a sigh of relief, as if the burden of its care was finally being shared. The next morning, Tabitha woke to the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly and found Samuel in the kitchen, frying bacon in her cast-iron skillet. Hope you don't mind, he said, gesturing to the stove. Seemed the least I could do. No, it's thank you. She couldn't remember the last time someone had cooked for her. Over breakfast, they planned the day's work. The fence needed mending, the chicken coop required reinforcement against foxes, and there was always weeding to be done in the vegetable garden. Samuel listened attentively as Tabitha listed the tasks, making occasional suggestions based on his own farming experience. You know what might help your south field, he said. Crop rotation. Plant beans there next season instead of corn, they'll put nitrogen back in the soil. James always planted corn there. With respect to your husband, madam, that land's showing signs of depletion. A different approach might save it. Tabitha bristled at first, then considered his words. I'll think on it, she conceded, surprising herself with her willingness to consider change. As promised, Samuel spent the day repairing the fence that enclosed their grazing pasture. Tabitha worked alongside him for part of the morning, holding posts steady as he secured them, but then returned to the endless task of keeping the garden productive. From her position among the tomato plants, she could see Samuel working steadily, his shirt soon discarded in the heat. His back was tanned and muscular, and she found her gaze returning to him more often than was proper. It had been so long since she'd had company, she told herself. That was all it was. By evening, the fence was mended, and Samuel had even managed to repair the broken wheel on the wagon that had been sitting useless since winter. They settled into a similar routine as the previous night, a simple supper, conversation on the porch, then retreating to their separate sleeping quarters. The next 5 days followed the same pattern. Samuel threw himself into the work with a determination that matched Tabitha's own. Together, they accomplished more than she had managed in the month since James's death. The irrigation system was functioning again, the animals were properly penned, and Samuel had even found time to repair the leaky roof that had been Tabitha's constant worry. On the evening of the 7th day, the end of their agreed trial period, Tabitha prepared a special supper of roast chicken and the first of the summer squash. As they ate, an unspoken question hung between them. Your week's up, she said finally, setting down her fork. You've more than earned your keep. Samuel wiped his mouth with his napkin. Are you asking me to go or inviting me to stay? I'm acknowledging our arrangement has reached its end. The decision is yours. He studied her face for a long moment. If I stay, it would still be just room and board. Nothing more. The question carried weight beyond the simple words. Tabitha felt heat rise to her cheeks. What are you asking, Mr. Nash? I'm asking if there's a place for me here beyond being a hired hand. I've grown fond of this land in just a week, and fonder still of its owner. His voice was steady, but she saw uncertainty in his eyes. That's mighty forward of you, she said, her heart racing. Forgive me if I've overstepped. Life's taught me to speak plainly. Tabitha stood and carried her plate to the basin, needing a moment to compose herself. The truth was, Samuel Nash had awakened feelings she'd thought buried with her husband. His quiet strength, his respectful manner, the way he looked at her as a partner rather than someone to be pitied, all of it had crept past her defenses. I think, she said carefully, that you should stay another week. As for anything more, I'm still a widow in mourning, Mr. Nash. Samuel, he corrected gently. And I understand, I'm a patient man, Mrs. Turner. Tabitha, she replied, offering a small concession. If you're to stay, we might as well use our given names. His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. Tabitha, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it on his tongue. It suits you. That night, as Tabitha prepared for bed, she found herself standing before the small mirror in her bedroom, really looking at herself for the first time in months. Grief had left its mark. She was thinner, her cheeks hollowed, her eyes holding a wariness that hadn't been there before. But beneath that, she was still young, still alive in a way James no longer was. The thought brought guilt, but also a flicker of something else. Hope, perhaps, or possibility. She removed the pins from her hair, letting it fall past her shoulders in chestnut waves. Then she took off her wedding ring, holding it in her palm for a long moment before placing it in the small box where she kept her few pieces of jewelry. Not yet, she whispered to the empty room, but maybe someday. The summer days stretched long and hot as July turned to August. Samuel remained, his presence becoming as natural as the sunrise. They fell into a rhythm, working side by side during the day, sharing meals and conversation in the evenings. Tabitha found herself laughing again, rediscovering pieces of herself that grief had hidden away. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Samuel's hand found hers. The touch was tentative, questioning. Tabitha hesitated only a moment before intertwining her fingers with his. Tell me about your life before, she said. You know my story, but you've shared little of yours. Samuel was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. I was married once, he said finally. Her name was Catherine. She died in childbirth along with our son. That was 4 years ago. I'm so sorry. Tabitha squeezed his hand. After I lost them, I couldn't stay in that house, that town. Everything reminded me of what might have been. So I started drifting, worked ranches, farms, anywhere that would have me. He looked at their joined hands. Never stayed anywhere long, never wanted to. Until now. Until now, he agreed. This place, it feels like something I could build a life around. The admission hung in the air between them, weighty with promise and uncertainty. Tabitha felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I'm not looking to replace your husband, Samuel continued softly. Just as I know no one could replace Catherine, but perhaps we could create something new together. I barely know you, she whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. In the weeks they'd worked together, she'd come to know Samuel Nash better than many people she'd known for years. She knew he hummed when he worked, that he was patient with animals but had little tolerance for waste, that he read poetry by lamplight when he thought she was asleep. You know enough, he said. The rest comes with time. The next day brought news that changed everything. Tabitha rode into Snowflake to purchase supplies and returned with a letter that had been waiting at the general store. Her face was ashen as she handed the paper to Samuel. The bank's foreclosing, she said, her voice flat. They say I've missed 2 payments and they're calling in the full debt. We have 30 days. Samuel scanned the official letter, his expression darkening. This isn't right. Your husband only just passed. There are laws about widows and property. Laws that favor banks and businessmen, not women trying to hold onto their land. Tabitha sank into a chair at the kitchen table. James borrowed more than I realized to get us through last year's drought. I've been paying what I could, but... How much do they want? $300. Might as well be $3,000 for all the chance I have of raising it. Samuel paced the small kitchen, thinking, what about selling some of the livestock? The 2 milk cows could fetch. Without them, there's no income through winter. The south field then, you could sell a portion of the land to keep the rest. No one's buying land around here now, not with the railroad bypassing Snowflake. She pressed her palms against her eyes. I've tried every angle, Samuel. I just didn't want to burden you with it. He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Your burdens are mine now, if you'll let them be. Tabitha looked into his eyes, seeing determination and something deeper that made her breath catch. What are you saying? I'm saying I have savings, not $300, but maybe half that. And I know ways to earn the rest quickly. I can't ask you to, you're not asking, I'm offering. He squeezed her hands. This land matters to you, so it matters to me. Why? The question was barely audible. Samuel's answer was to lean forward and press his lips to hers, a gentle kiss that asked more than it demanded. When he pulled away, Tabitha's eyes remained closed for a moment, savoring the sensation. That's why, he said simply. They formulated a plan over the next days. Samuel would ride to Holbrook, the larger town 30 miles east, where he had connections from his travels. He believed he could find short-term work that paid well, possibly at the new railroad station being built there. Tabitha would continue tending the farm and look into selling some of their grain harvest early, even at a reduced price. The morning of his departure, Samuel saddled his gray horse before dawn. Tabitha stood in the yard, hugging herself against the morning chill. I'll be back in 2 weeks, he promised. Sooner if I can. Be careful, she said, trying to mask the worry in her voice. Holbrook has a rough reputation. I've handled rougher. He adjusted his saddlebags, then turned to face her. Tabitha, I need to say something before I go. She nodded, sensing the gravity in his tone. I know it's been a short time, and I know you're still healing, but I love you, have almost since that first day. He said the words plainly, without embellishment. You don't need to say anything back. I just wanted you to know in case. In case what? She demanded, suddenly afraid. In case life throws us another curve, it has a habit of doing that. Tabitha closed the distance between them, rising on her toes to kiss him fiercely. Come back to me, she whispered against his lips. That's all I ask. Samuel held her close for a long moment, breathing in the scent of her hair. Count on it, he said, before mounting his horse and riding away into the lightening sky. The days without Samuel stretched endlessly. Tabitha threw herself into the work, pushing her body to exhaustion each day so sleep would come easier at night. She managed to sell some early wheat to a neighboring farmer at a fair price, adding $30 to their fund. On the 10th day after Samuel's departure, a different rider approached the farm. Tabitha recognized him immediately. Edward Blackwood, the bank manager from Snowflake. His expensive suit and polished boots seemed out of place against the dusty landscape. Mrs. Turner, he greeted her, tipping his hat without dismounting. I was passing by and thought I'd check on your progress regarding the outstanding debt. The deadline isn't for another 20 days, Mr. Blackwood. Indeed, but it never hurts to plan ahead. Have you considered my offer to purchase the property? His smile didn't reach his eyes. It would save you a great deal of trouble. Tabitha's hands clenched at her sides. Blackwood had approached her at James's funeral, speaking of business opportunities when the dirt was still fresh on her husband's grave. His offer had been insultingly low then, and she doubted it had improved. This land isn't for sale. Everything has its price, Mrs. Turner. Especially when necessity dictates. He surveyed the farm with calculating eyes. I notice you've had help recently. A hired hand, a friend, she corrected, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. Friends come and go, debts remain. Blackwood adjusted his hat. My offer stands at $150 for the entire property. Given your situation, I'd call that generous. And I'd call it robbery. Good day, Mr. Blackwood. His expression hardened. Pride before the fall, Mrs. Turner. Think of your future. I am, she replied, turning back toward the house. That's why I'm keeping my land. As Blackwood rode away, Tabitha felt a chill despite the summer heat. The banker wanted her land, that much was clear. What wasn't clear was why he coveted this particular property when larger, more profitable farms surrounded them. That evening, while searching James's old desk for record of their original loan, Tabitha found something unexpected, a deed to water rights she hadn't known they possessed. According to the document, the creek that ran through their property was legally theirs to use and control, including the right to dam or divert it. The significance hit her like a thunderbolt. Their creek fed into the larger stream that supplied most of the valley's farms. With the ongoing drought, whoever controlled that water held power over the surrounding lands. Blackwood wasn't after her farm, he wanted the water rights. The revelation gave new urgency to their situation. Tabitha spent a restless night planning what to do if Samuel didn't return in time with the money. She could possibly get an extension from the bank's head office in Flagstaff, or appeal to the territorial court, though both options were long shots for a woman alone. By the 14th day, with no word from Samuel, Tabitha began to fear the worst. Had he abandoned her after all, or met with some accident or trouble in Holbrook? She tried to push away thoughts of him lying injured or worse, focusing instead on the practical matters of running the farm. That afternoon, while repairing the chicken coop, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart leaped, only to sink when she saw 3 riders instead of 1, and none of them Samuel. The men reined in their horses at the edge of the yard. Their leader, a hard-faced man with a scar across his jaw, touched the brim of his hat in mock politeness. "Afternoon, madam. Looking for a fellow named Nash. Samuel Nash. Word in town is he's been staying here." Tabitha kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened with fear. "May I ask why you're looking for him?" The scarred man exchanged glances with his companions. "Let's just say he owes us a conversation about some business in Texas. That your husband?" "No," she replied truthfully. "Mr. Nash worked here briefly but moved on. I haven't seen him in weeks." The man dismounted, his spurs jingling as he approached. He was tall and lean, with the coiled readiness of a predator. "Mind if we look around, just to be sure?" It wasn't a request. Tabitha nodded stiffly, watching as the men spread out to search the barn and outbuildings. The leader stayed near her, his gaze uncomfortably invasive. "Pretty woman like you out here all alone. That's a shame." "I manage," Tabitha said curtly. "I bet you do." He stepped closer, forcing her to back up against the chicken coop. "Nash always did have an eye for the pretty ones. But he's not reliable, darlin'. Gets people in trouble, then rides away." "I wouldn't know," the man chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Course you wouldn't." He reached out to touch a strand of her hair, and Tabitha jerked away. "Feisty too, I like that." The other men returned from their search, shaking their heads. "No sign of him, Joe," one reported. Joe's eyes never left Tabitha's face. "When he shows up, and you tell him Jake Hollister's looking for him, he'll know what it means." His hand moved to his gun belt. "And if you're thinking of warning him off, don't. That would make me very unhappy." They mounted up and rode away, leaving Tabitha shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. Whoever these men were, they meant Samuel harm, and they expected him to return to her farm. Night fell with no sign of Samuel. Tabitha brought her rifle into the house and barred the doors, jumping at every sound the wind made in the eaves. She dozed fitfully in a chair by the window, waking at dawn with a stiff neck and a sense of dread. As she was making coffee, hoofbeats once again approached the house. Tabitha grabbed her rifle and positioned herself by the window, ready to defend herself if Hollister and his men had returned. But it was a single rider this time, Samuel, hunched low in the saddle, his shirt dark with what looked horrifyingly like blood. Tabitha dropped the rifle and ran outside, reaching him just as he slid from the horse. She caught him, staggering under his weight. "Samuel, what happened?" "Had some trouble," he managed, his voice weak. "But I got it, Tabitha, I got the money." She helped him into the house, easing him into a chair. His shirt was indeed soaked with blood, a bullet wound in his left shoulder the source. Without asking questions, Tabitha set to work cleaning and bandaging the injury. It was a clean shot, the bullet had gone straight through, but he'd lost a lot of blood. "Those men were here," she said as she worked. "Hollister, they're looking for you." Samuel closed his eyes briefly. "I was afraid of that. Jake never did know when to let go of a grudge." "What did you do to him?" "Testified against his brother 5 years ago, got him hanged for murder." Samuel winced as she applied pressure to the wound. "Jake swore he'd kill me for it, nearly succeeded this time. You've seen him before." "That's why I've been drifting. Harder to find a moving target." He reached for her hand. "I'm sorry, Tabitha, I never meant to bring trouble to your door." She tied off the bandage with more force than necessary. "You might have mentioned you had killers on your trail before you decided to stay. Would you have let me if I had?" Tabitha sighed, the anger draining out of her. "Probably not, but that's not the point." She filled a cup with water and helped him drink. "What happened in Hallbrook?" "Got work at the new railroad yard. Good pay. Then ran into an old friend who needed a guard for a gold shipment." Samuel shifted, grimacing at the pain. "It paid enough to make up what we needed, so I took it. Hollister and his boys tried to rob us outside of town. I got shot, but we drove them off. And the money," Samuel patted his coat pocket, "all here, $300, enough to pay off the bank." Relief flooded Tabitha, followed immediately by renewed concern. "Hollister thinks you'll come back here. We need to get you someplace safe until you're healed." "No," Samuel said firmly, "I'm done running. This is where I want to be with you. If that means facing Jake Hollister, so be it. Don't be foolish. You can barely stand, let alone fight. I heal quick." He reached for her again, his hand warm despite his pallor. "Tabitha, I meant what I said before I left. I love you. If you don't feel the same, I'll understand, but I'm not leaving you to face this alone." Tabitha looked at him, this man who had ridden into her life 2 months ago and changed everything. She thought of the empty days before his arrival, the loneliness that had threatened to swallow her whole. She thought of his gentle hands and quiet strength, his unwavering support through their struggles. "I love you too," she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. "But loving someone means protecting them, even from themselves. We need help." They decided to ride into Snowflake the next day to pay the bank and seek the sheriff's assistance with Hollister. Samuel was too weak to travel immediately, so they agreed to wait until morning. Tabitha made up a bed for him in the main room, unwilling to leave him in the barn in his condition. As she checked his bandages that evening, Samuel caught her wrist. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Tabitha stared at him. "You're delirious from blood loss. I'm serious." Despite his injury, his eyes were clear and determined. "I know it's fast, and I know you're still grieving. But life's too short and uncertain to waste time when you find something worth holding on to. Samuel, you don't have to answer now, just think about it." He released her wrist. "But know that whatever happens with Hollister, whatever happens with this farm, my feelings won't change." That night, Tabitha lay awake in her bed, listening to Samuel's breathing in the next room. Marriage, the idea seemed simultaneously absurd and perfectly right. James had been gone only a few months, yet it felt like years. She had loved him deeply, but that love now lived in memory, while her feelings for Samuel were vibrantly present. What would people think? The proper mourning period was at least a year. Then again, propriety mattered little compared to survival, and out here in the Arizona territory, conventional rules often bent to accommodate the harsh realities of frontier life. More importantly, what did she want? The answer came with surprising clarity. She wanted Samuel. She wanted mornings with his smile, evenings with his conversation, a lifetime of building something together. The realization brought tears to her eyes, not of grief this time, but of possibility. Dawn brought a decision. Tabitha dressed carefully, braiding her hair the way Samuel had once complimented. When she entered the main room, he was already awake, sitting up with better color than the day before. "Yes," she said without preamble. Samuel's expression shifted from confusion to dawning joy. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Not because of Hollister or the farm or anything else, because I love you and life is indeed too short to pretend otherwise." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "When?" "As soon as you're well enough to stand before a preacher without bleeding on the church floor." Samuel laughed, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. "I'll heal faster now with that to look forward to." They set out for Snowflake mid-morning, Samuel insisting he was strong enough to ride. Tabitha kept close beside him, watching for signs of weakness. The $300 was secured in an inside pocket of her dress, the precious funds that would save her farm their farm now. The small town was quiet as they rode in, only a few people moving along the main street. They headed straight for the bank, determined to settle the debt first before seeking out the sheriff. Edward Blackwood's expression when they entered was a study in controlled disappointment. He had clearly not expected Tabitha to produce the full amount. Mrs. Turner, Mr. Nash. His greeting was cool as they approached his desk. "What brings you to town today?" Tabitha placed the stack of bills before him. "The full amount owed, Mr. Blackwood, $300, as stated in your letter." Blackwood made no move to take the money. "I'm afraid there's been a development, Mrs. Turner. The bank has reassessed the value of your loan and determined that additional interest is due." "What?" Samuel stepped forward. "That's not legal. You can't change terms after sending a formal notice." "I assure you, Mr. Nash, everything is quite legal. The original loan agreement included provisions for adjusting interest rates." Blackwood slid a document across the desk. "The new amount due is $450. Tabitha felt the blood drain from her face. "That's extortion." "That's business," Blackwood countered smoothly. "Of course, my offer to purchase the property still stands, $150 and all debts forgiven." Samuel's hand moved toward his gun, but Tabitha stopped him with a touch. "May we see the original loan agreement?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Certainly." Blackwood produced another document from his desk drawer, handing it to her with obvious reluctance. Tabitha scanned the dense legal text, looking for the clause he'd mentioned. Finding it, she read carefully, then looked up with narrowed eyes. "This says interest rates may be adjusted with 30 days written notice. There's been no notice." Blackwood's smile tightened. "I'm giving you notice now." "That's not how contracts work," Samuel said. "And I think the territorial judge would agree." "Are you threatening legal action, Mr. Nash? Because I assure you the bank's attorneys in Flagstaff would." "What about the water rights?" Tabitha interrupted. "Are those included in your offer to buy our land?" The question caught Blackwood off guard. A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he composed himself. "All assets associated with the property would naturally transfer in a sale, including the rights to dam and divert the creek." Blackwood's expression hardened. "What exactly are you implying, Mrs. Turner? That you're not interested in our farm? You want the water to control the other farms in the valley during the drought?" Tabitha placed the deed to the water rights on the desk. "This is what you're after, isn't it?" The banker's silence was confirmation enough. "Here's what's going to happen," Samuel said, leaning forward. "You're going to accept the $300 as payment in full. You're going to provide Mrs. Turner with a receipt acknowledging the debt is settled. And you're going to stop harassing her about selling her land. Or what? Or I'll ride to Flagstaff tomorrow and speak with the bank's directors about your attempt to manipulate loan terms for personal gain." I imagine they'd be interested to learn how their snowflake manager is trying to acquire valuable water rights through deception. Blackwood's face flushed with anger, but his practical nature prevailed. After a tense moment, he reached for the money. "Very well. $300, payment in full." He counted the bills methodically, then wrote out a receipt. "I hope you understand, Mrs. Turner, that the bank will be unlikely to extend credit to you in the future." "I understand perfectly," Tabitha replied, taking the receipt. "Good day, Mr. Blackwood." Outside the bank, she sagged against Samuel in relief. "I can't believe he actually tried that. Men like Blackwood always overreach eventually." Samuel wrapped an arm around her waist. "Now let's find the sheriff about our other problem." The sheriff's office was at the end of the main street, a simple adobe building with the territorial flag hanging limply in the still air. As they approached, the door opened and Jake Hollister himself stepped out, followed by his two companions. Tabitha and Samuel froze. Hollister spotted them immediately, his hand dropping to his gun. "Well, well," he drawled. "Saved us the trouble of riding out to find you, Nash." Samuel pushed Tabitha behind him. "This is between us, Jake. Leave her out of it." "Too late for that. She lied to protect you." Hollister's scarred face twisted in a mockery of a smile. "Besides, I like the idea of you watching what happens to her before I kill you." "That won't be happening," came a stern voice from the doorway. Sheriff Davis stepped out, his badge catching the sunlight. "Mr. Hollister was just leaving town, weren't you?" Hollister glanced at the sheriff, weighing his options. "This isn't your concern, Davis. 3 armed men threatening folks in my town makes it my concern." The sheriff's hand rested on his own weapon. Now, I told you before, you have no business here without evidence of any crime. Mr. Nash hasn't broken any laws in my jurisdiction. He's a murderer. Your brother was hanged after a fair trial, Samuel said evenly. I only testified to what I saw. Hollister spat on the ground. Fair trial. They strung him up because of your lies. Enough, Sheriff Davis interrupted. Hollister, you and your men have until sundown to clear out of Snowflake. After that, I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace and threatening law-abiding citizens. For a tense moment, it seemed Hollister might draw his gun despite the sheriff's presence. Then he relaxed deliberately, his eyes never leaving Samuel's face. This isn't over, Nash, not by a long shot. He jerked his head at his companions. Let's go. They mounted their horses and rode slowly out of town, Hollister turning once to fix Samuel with a final, hate-filled glare. You should stay in town tonight, Sheriff Davis advised once they were gone. Hollister's not the type to heed warnings. Samuel nodded, his arm still protectively around Tabitha. We'll get a room at the hotel. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet. Men like that don't give up easy. The sheriff looked between them. You two married? Not yet, Tabitha replied, but soon. Davis raised an eyebrow but didn't comment further. Come back in the morning before you head home. I'll ride out with you, make sure Hollister hasn't decided to pay your place a visit. They took a room at Snowflake's only hotel, a modest establishment above the general store. Samuel's wound needed redressing, and the exertion of the day had left him pale and drawn. Tabitha tended to him with gentle hands, her heart aching at each wince of pain. We should postpone the wedding, she said as she secured a fresh bandage, until you're properly healed. Not a chance, Samuel replied, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. I'm not risking you changing your mind, as if I would. She sat beside him on the narrow bed, but I want you well for our wedding night. A slow smile spread across his face. That's a powerful incentive to heal quickly. They spent the evening in quiet conversation, making plans for their future. The farm needed improvements, a larger barn, better fencing for expanded livestock, perhaps a second well closer to the house. Samuel spoke of breeding horses, a skill he'd learned in Texas, while Tabitha described her dream of an orchard on the north slope. We'll need to rebuild the house eventually, Samuel mused. Add rooms for the children. Children? Tabitha echoed, surprised by how much the idea appealed to her. If you want them. His expression was earnest. I've always wanted a family. I do want them, she admitted. With you, they fell asleep in each other's arms, propriety set aside in favor of comfort and closeness. Tabitha's last thought before drifting off was how natural it felt to lie beside Samuel, as if her body had always known this was where she belonged. Morning brought clarity and renewed purpose. Samuel's color was better, his strength returning, though he still moved carefully to avoid tearing his wound. After a simple breakfast in the hotel's dining room, they went to speak with the town's preacher, arranging to be married the following Sunday. It's a bit sudden, Reverend Miller observed mildly, looking between them. Especially given your recent bereavement, Mrs. Turner. Life on the frontier doesn't always allow for conventional timelines, Tabitha replied. James would want me to be happy and secure. The Reverend nodded, seeming to accept her reasoning. And you're sure about this, Mr. Nash? Taking on a farm and a widow is a significant responsibility. The only thing I'm sure about in this world is that I love her, Samuel said, his voice steady. Everything else we'll figure out together. With the wedding arranged, they collected Sheriff Davis and rode back to the farm. The journey was tense, all three scanning the landscape for signs of Hollister and his men. But they reached the property without incident, finding everything as they had left it. I'll keep an eye out, Davis promised as he prepared to depart, and I've sent word to the sheriffs in neighboring counties about Hollister. With luck, he's moved on, and if he hasn't, Tabitha couldn't help asking, then we deal with him. The sheriff's expression was grim. But fair warning, stay alert and keep your rifle handy. The next few days passed in watchful preparation, both for potential trouble and for their upcoming wedding. Tabitha cleaned the house thoroughly, while Samuel, despite his injury, insisted on making repairs he'd noticed needed doing. They worked side by side, stealing kisses and sharing dreams, the threat of Hollister a shadow they refused to let darken their happiness, On Saturday evening, the night before their wedding, they sat on the porch as twilight descended. The air was cooler now, hinting at the approach of autumn. Crickets chirped in the tall grass, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. "This time tomorrow you'll be Mrs. Nash," Samuel said, his arm around Tabitha's shoulders. She leaned into him, savoring his warmth. "And you'll be a landowner, quite a change from drifting." "The best change," he kissed the top of her head, "though I admit, sometimes I still can't believe you said yes. Because I'm a respectable widow rushing into a second marriage," she teased. "Because you're the most beautiful, strongest woman I've ever known, and I'm just a cowboy with a troubled past." Tabitha turned to face him. "You're much more than that, Samuel Nash. You're the man who saved my farm, who works from sunrise to sunset without complaint, who makes me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how." She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "You're the man I love." Their kiss was deep and unhurried, filled with promise. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "One more night," Samuel whispered against her lips. "Then forever." Morning dawned clear and bright, the perfect day for a wedding. Tabitha dressed in her best gown, a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. She wore her hair down, adorned only with a ribbon and a sprig of wildflowers from the meadow. Samuel waited for her on the porch, handsome in clean shirt and vest, his dark hair combed neatly. The wonder in his eyes when he saw her made Tabitha's heart skip. "You're a vision," he said, offering his arm. They rode to town side by side, Samuel insisting they take the wagon rather than horseback so Tabitha's dress wouldn't be ruined. The little church was ready for them, sunlight streaming through its simple, stained glass windows. A few townspeople had gathered, curious about the hasty wedding, along with the sheriff and his wife, who had agreed to stand as witnesses. Reverend Miller conducted the ceremony with dignified simplicity. When it came time for the vows, Samuel's voice rang clear and certain. "I, Samuel, take you, Tabitha, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love, honor, and protect you in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as we both shall live." Tabitha repeated the vows with equal conviction, her eyes never leaving his. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her with such tenderness that several of the ladies in attendance dabbed at their eyes. The small reception at the town's only restaurant was a cheerful affair, with neighbors offering congratulations and advice. Sheriff Davis raised a toast to the newlyweds, wishing them long lives and short troubles. By mid-afternoon, they were heading home, married in the eyes of God and the law. As they approached the farm, Samuel reined in the wagon suddenly. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice low. "The front door's open." Tabitha peered ahead. He was right. The door she had carefully closed when they left stood wide open. "Could be the wind," she suggested, though she knew the heavy oak door wouldn't blow open easily. Samuel reached beneath the seat for his rifle. "Stay in the wagon until I check it out. We should go for the sheriff. If it's Hollister, he could burn the place before we get back." Samuel handed her the reins. "If there's trouble, turn around and ride for town as fast as you can." Before Tabitha could argue, he was moving toward the house in a half-crouch, rifle ready. She watched with her heart in her throat as he disappeared inside. Long minutes passed with no sound, no movement. "Samuel," she finally called, unable to bear the suspense. No answer, making a quick decision, Tabitha secured the reins and climbed down from the wagon. She retrieved the shotgun they kept under the seat and approached the house cautiously, every sense alert for danger. The main room was empty, furniture disturbed, but nothing obviously missing. She moved deeper into the house, shotgun raised. "Samuel," a noise from the bedroom made her freeze. Then Samuel's voice, "In here, it's clear." She found him standing in the center of the small bedroom, surveying the destruction around him. The mattress had been slashed, dresser drawers emptied onto the floor, her few possessions scattered and broken. "They were looking for something," Samuel said grimly, "the money." Tabitha lowered the shotgun, "But we paid it to the bank. Hollister doesn't know that. He probably thought we had cash hidden here." Samuel kicked at a pile of clothing. "They took my saddlebags too. Not much in them but a change of clothes and some personal items." Tabitha began gathering her scattered belongings. "At least they didn't burn the place down. They wanted us to know they'd been here. A warning. Samuel helped her collect the torn bedding. We should check the barn and outbuildings. The barn had been searched as well, but the animals were untouched. The chicken coop was intact and the tool shed showed signs of entry, but nothing valuable had been taken. What now? Tabitha asked as they returned to the house. Do we go to the sheriff and tell him what? That someone searched our house but didn't actually steal anything of value. Samuel shook his head. Davis already knows Hollister's a threat. This just confirms it. So we wait for them to come back on our wedding night. Samuel's expression softened. He set down his rifle and took Tabitha in his arms. No, Mrs. Nash, we clean up, we prepare, and then we celebrate our marriage. I'm not letting Jake Hollister ruin this day. Together they restored order to the house, replacing what could be salvaged and making a list of items that needed replacing. Samuel reinforced the locks on doors and windows, while Tabitha prepared a special wedding supper from the provisions they'd purchased in town. As night fell, they lit lamps and closed the curtains, creating a warm sanctuary against the darkness outside. Samuel uncorked a bottle of wine he'd bought as a surprise, pouring 2 glasses. To us, he toasted, his eyes never leaving hers, and to our future, whatever it may hold. Tabitha clinked her glass against his. To us. Later, in the restored bedroom with new blankets on the bed, Samuel took Tabitha in his arms with a gentleness that made her eyes fill with tears. His kisses traced a path from her lips to her throat, his hands reverent on her skin. I love you, he whispered against her collarbone. More than I thought possible. Show me, she breathed, drawing him closer. Their lovemaking was tender at first, then increasingly passionate as they discovered each other's bodies. Tabitha marveled at the strength in Samuel's lean frame, the way his muscles moved beneath his skin, the softness of his touch despite the calluses on his hands. For his part, Samuel worshipped her with lips and fingers, learning what made her gasp and sigh, treating each response as a precious gift. Afterward, lying in each other's arms with moonlight filtering through the curtains, Tabitha felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since before James fell ill. What are you thinking? Samuel asked, tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. That I'm happy, she replied honestly. Despite everything Hollister, the bank, all of it, I'm happier than I've been in a very long time, he smiled, pulling her closer. Me too. For a man who never expected to put down roots again, I'm surprisingly content with being tied to this land, and to you. They fell asleep entwined, the threats of the outside world temporarily forgotten in the cocoon of their new marriage. Dawn brought a return to routine: animals to feed, eggs to collect, water to haul. But now they moved through these tasks together, sharing smiles and touches that made even the most mundane chores seem special. As September gave way to October, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Samuel's shoulder healed completely, allowing him to take on heavier work. Together they harvested the remaining crops, stored food for winter, and began implementing some of the improvements they'd planned. There was no further sign of Hollister or his men, though neither Tabitha nor Samuel fully relaxed their vigilance. They kept weapons close at hand and took turns watching when strangers approached the property. Sheriff Davis rode out twice to check on them, reporting no sightings of Hollister in the area. Maybe he's given up, Tabitha suggested one evening as they sat by the fire, Samuel carving a new bedpost while she mended shirts. Maybe, Samuel agreed, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Or maybe he's just biding his time. We can't live in fear forever. No, we can't. He set aside his carving, which is why I've been thinking we should confront this head-on. Tabitha looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means we find Hollister before he finds us, end this once and for all. That's madness. He has 2 men with him and who knows how many others. I have friends too, Samuel said quietly, men who owe me favors. I've written to some of them, asking them to keep an ear out for Hollister's whereabouts. Without telling me, hurt colored her voice. I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily. He moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. Tabitha, I can't build a life with you while constantly looking over my shoulder. If there's a chance to resolve this permanently, I have to take it. She wanted to argue, to forbid him from putting himself in danger. but the determination in his eyes told her he'd already made his decision. "Promise me you won't go alone," she said finally. "Promise me you'll take the sheriff or someone else you trust." "I promise." He kissed her knuckles. "And I promise to come home to you, always." The next day brought unexpected news. A telegram arrived from a friend of Samuel's in Prescott, reporting that Hollister and his men had been seen heading west toward California. The friend had followed discreetly long enough to confirm they weren't doubling back. "He's given up," Tabitha said, relief evident in her voice as she read the telegram. "We're free of him." Samuel looked less convinced. "For now, at least, but this is good news. It gives us time to strengthen our position here, make this place more defensible in case he ever does return." With the immediate threat diminished, they turned their attention fully to building their future. The farm flourished under their combined efforts. Samuel's knowledge of livestock breeding helped improve their small herd, while Tabitha's careful gardening ensured a bountiful harvest from the kitchen plot. They hosted a harvest dinner for neighboring families in late October, solidifying their place in the community. The evening was filled with music, laughter, and good food, with several guests remarking on the obvious happiness of the newlyweds. "You've done well for yourself, Tabitha, Mrs. Johnson, the blacksmith's wife, commented as they washed dishes afterward. "When James passed, we all worried, but that husband of yours is a good man. Anyone can see how he looks at you." "I'm very blessed," Tabitha agreed, watching through the window as Samuel demonstrated rope tricks to the children in the yard. "And when might we expect little ones?" Mrs. Johnson asked with the directness of a frontier woman. Tabitha smiled, one hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen. "Sooner than you might think." She hadn't yet told Samuel her suspicion that she was carrying their child. The signs were still new: a missed monthly cycle, a persistent queasiness in the mornings, a tenderness in her breasts. But she was almost certain, and the thought filled her with quiet joy. That night after their guests had departed, Tabitha led Samuel to the porch swing. The air was crisp with autumn, the stars brilliant in the clear sky. "I have something to tell you," she said, nestling against him. "Sounds serious." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "It is." She took a deep breath. "Samuel, I believe I'm going to have a baby, your baby." For a moment he was utterly still, then he turned to face her, his expression a mix of wonder and disbelief. "A baby," he whispered. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation." "It's early yet. I think the baby will come in late spring." Samuel's face broke into a radiant smile. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he repeated. "Tabitha, you've made me the happiest man alive." She laughed, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "We made this together." "A family," he said, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Our family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. The farm entered its quiet season, with shorter days spent on indoor tasks and long evenings by the fire. Samuel worked tirelessly to prepare for the baby's arrival, building a cradle and rocking chair, reinforcing the house against the cold, ensuring they had ample supplies stored for when travel would be difficult. Tabitha's body changed gradually, her slender form rounding with new life. Samuel watched these changes with fascination and devotion, his hands gentle on the growing swell of her belly, his voice soft as he spoke to their unborn child each night. Christmas brought a heavy snowfall that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland. They celebrated quietly, exchanging simple gifts: a new hat Tabitha had knitted for Samuel, a delicate silver locket he'd ordered from a catalog for her. "For pictures of our family," he explained as she admired it. "You, me, and the little one." New Year's Day, 1887, dawned clear and cold. As they stood on the porch watching the sunrise, Samuel pulled Tabitha close. "This will be our year," he promised. "Everything we've dreamed of is coming true." February brought a Chinook wind that melted much of the snow, allowing Samuel to begin spring preparations earlier than expected. He expanded the vegetable garden, adding raised beds that would be easier for Tabitha to tend as her pregnancy advanced. He repaired fences damaged by winter storms and began clearing a small orchard site on the north slope. In March, During a trip to Snowflake for supplies, they visited the doctor who confirmed what they already knew: Tabitha was healthy and the baby was developing normally, due to arrive in late May or early June. "A summer baby," Samuel said as they drove home. "Born when the land is at its most generous. Boy or girl, what do you hope for?" Tabitha asked, her hand resting on her prominent belly. "Healthy," he replied without hesitation. "Beyond that, I have no preference, though I do like the name Sarah if it's a girl. Sarah Nash." Tabitha tested the name. "It has a lovely sound, and for a boy." "What about Thomas, after your father?" Tabitha squeezed his hand, touched by the suggestion. "Thomas Nash, equally fine." April brought the first wildflowers and the return of birdsong to the farm. Tabitha, now in her 8th month, moved more slowly but insisted on maintaining her share of the lighter work. Samuel watched her like a hawk, quick to take heavy objects from her hands or insist she rest when she showed signs of fatigue. "I'm pregnant, not made of porcelain," she protested one afternoon when he forbade her from helping to plant potatoes. "Humor me," he replied, kissing her forehead. "I've waited my whole life for this family. Allow me to fuss a little." She relented, recognizing the love behind his overprotectiveness. In truth, she treasured his attentiveness, the way his eyes followed her around the farm, the gentle touches and constant concern for her comfort. May arrived with warming days and the promise of summer. The farm was thriving. New calves frolicked in the pasture, the vegetable garden sprouted tender green shoots, and Samuel's newly planted orchard showed its first buds. Tabitha's due date approached, bringing a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Everything's ready," Samuel assured her as they prepared for bed one night. "The cradle's by our bed. We have more baby clothes than one child could possibly wear thanks to the ladies in town, and Mrs. Johnson has promised to come help when the time comes." "And you?" Tabitha asked, studying his face in the lamplight. "Are you ready, Samuel Nash, to be a father?" He placed his hand on her belly, smiling as the baby kicked against his palm. "I can't wait to meet this little one. To teach him or her everything I know, to watch them grow on this land we've made our own." He met her gaze. "But most of all, I can't wait to see you as a mother. You're going to be wonderful, Tabitha." She kissed him softly. "We both are." 2 weeks later, on a warm evening as the sun set over the mountains, Tabitha's labor began. Samuel sent their nearest neighbor to fetch Mrs. Johnson and the doctor, then returned to Tabitha's side, determined not to leave her through the ordeal ahead. The labor progressed through the night, Tabitha's strength and courage leaving Samuel in awe. He held her hand, wiped her brow, whispered encouragement as she worked to bring their child into the world. Mrs. Johnson arrived shortly after midnight, bringing calm efficiency to the birthing room, while the doctor arrived just before dawn. "You're doing beautifully," the doctor assured Tabitha after examining her. "Not long now." As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, Tabitha gave a final, powerful push, and their child slid into the world with a lusty cry. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the red-faced, squalling infant on Tabitha's chest. "A fine, healthy son." Thomas James Nash, named for both Tabitha's father and her first husband, weighed 8 pounds and had a shock of dark hair that promised to match his father's. His tiny hands curled into fists as he protested his abrupt entry into the world, then quieted as Tabitha cradled him close. Samuel stood transfixed, tears streaming unashamed down his face as he gazed at his wife and son. When Tabitha offered the baby to him, he took the small bundle with trembling hands, marveling at the perfect features, the diminutive fingernails, the powerful grip as Thomas caught his father's finger. "Hello, Thomas," he whispered. "I'm your pa. And I promise you, son, I will love and protect you all the days of my life." The summer of 1887 passed in a blur of joyful exhaustion as Samuel and Tabitha adjusted to parenthood. Thomas thrived, growing stronger each day, his personality emerging in small but distinct ways, his serious expression when encountering something new, his ready smile for his mother's singing, his fascination with his father's deep voice. The farm prospered alongside the growing family. Samuel's careful management and Tabitha's renewed energy after recovering from childbirth resulted in their best harvest yet. They paid off the last of James's old debts and even managed to set aside savings for the future. By Thomas's first birthday, they had expanded the house, adding a proper bedroom for their son and a larger kitchen where Tabitha could preserve the garden's bounty more efficiently. Samuel's orchard had survived its first winter, the young trees promising future abundance. Life settled into a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Thomas's first steps across the kitchen floor, his first words "ma" and "pa" in quick succession, his delight in the farm animals, especially the kittens born in the barn that became his constant playmates. In the fall of 1888, Tabitha discovered she was expecting again. Samuel received the news with even greater joy than the first time, lifting her off her feet in celebration. "Another blessing," he said, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "Thomas will make a fine big brother." Their daughter, Sarah Catherine Nash, arrived in the spring of 1889, a delicate beauty with her mother's chestnut hair and her father's storm-gray eyes. Thomas, now a sturdy 2-year-old, approached his baby sister with solemn curiosity, declaring her pretty, before returning to his beloved wooden horse. The years that followed brought both challenges and rewards. Drought threatened the farm in 1890, forcing Samuel to dig a deeper well and implement more sophisticated irrigation. A harsh winter in 1891 kept them housebound for weeks, testing their patience but strengthening their bonds as a family. Through it all, Samuel and Tabitha's love deepened, their partnership evolving as they faced each new challenge together. They disagreed at times, Samuel's protective instincts occasionally clashing with Tabitha's independent nature, but they never went to bed angry, adhering to this rule with steadfast commitment. By 1895, their family and farm had expanded significantly. A third child, William Samuel Nash, joined them in 1892, completing their family. The original modest homestead had grown to include a new 2-story house, a large barn, extensive pastures for their growing herd, and Samuel's orchard now produced apples, pears, and cherries in abundance. They had become respected members of the snowflake community. Samuel served on the town council, while Tabitha organized a ladies' aid society that supported families in need. Their children attended the local school, thriving academically and socially. Edward Blackwood had long since moved on, replaced by a more ethical bank manager who actually helped local farmers secure fair loans for expansion. Jake Hollister was a distant memory. They had learned years earlier that he'd been killed in a saloon brawl in California, ending that chapter of their lives definitively. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Tabitha with a trip to San Francisco, a 2-week adventure, leaving the children in the capable care of Mrs. Johnson and her daughters. It was the first time either of them had seen the Pacific Ocean, and they stood hand in hand on the beach, marveling at its vastness. "Did you ever imagine this?" Tabitha asked, "when you rode up to my farm that day?" Samuel drew her close, his arms as strong and sure as they had been a decade earlier. "I imagined possibility," he said, "but the reality has surpassed every dream I could have had, even with all the hardships, especially with those." He kissed her temple. "They showed us what we're made of together." Returning to the farm, they were greeted by their children running down the lane, faces alight with excitement at their parents' return. As Samuel lifted Sarah into his arms and Tabitha embraced Thomas and William, they exchanged a look of perfect understanding. This was what Samuel had meant when he first asked to stay, not just a job or a place to sleep, but the chance to create something lasting and meaningful. A family, a legacy. A love that had transformed 2 broken hearts into something stronger than either could have been alone. The land that had once seemed determined to defeat a widow working alone now flourished under their combined care. And as the sun set over their property, painting the sky in colors no artist could capture, Tabitha and Samuel Nash stood surrounded by the fruits of their labor and love, grateful for that fateful day when a dusty cowboy had ridden up and changed everything with 4 simple words: "Let me stay."